Welcome to Willow's Green Permaculture, because that makes for healthy plants. When you roast that until you can spread it like butter, that you never have to plant again. A lot of organic matter, a lot of humus to hold between 400 and 500 of them. This is how you get your big bulbs. Now, don't peel them. Just about anywhere in your garden. Any compost will do as long as it's well rotted. Which means the peels you can use in your cooking. Can become part of your perennial food forest. Just don't plant it close to where you're gonna have. You left it there, you did nothing. The following year, Good afternoon and welcome to Willow's Green Permaculture. It's late fall, it's the 3rd of November today, and we're a couple weeks or maybe at most a month away from freeze up, or at least nights where the ground freezes and it's frozen until halfway through the next day or more. And so now's the time to get the garlic in. Today I'd like to talk to you not only about planting your garlic, but all the other steps in between. And so it's going to be a complete guide to growing garlic, to getting your biggest bulbs, but also how you can use the garlic in your garden for many, many more reasons to help the garlic contribute to your food forest. So let's get started. Garlic is a plant that you can put in anywhere in your garden, and it's going to act as a companion plant for most of your vegetables. Just don't plant it close to where you're going to have peas or beans, because peas, beans, and garlic don't get along. But otherwise, garlic is great to have almost anywhere, because like any of your aromatic plants, it's going to repel the pests of the other vegetables, which is really great, and it doesn't take a whole lot of space. So when you plant it everywhere, you can plant it beside almost any vegetables, and it's not going to shade them out, and it'll grow well. Depending on the conditions, it might not give you your biggest garlics, but if you're using it as a companion plant or just as a food forest item, then it does. The size doesn't really matter. I'll get to it in a moment. I'll get to how you grow your biggest bulbs. But as a companion plant, it's great because you can plant it anywhere in your garden, and you can harvest some of it and let the rest of it overwinter. When you've got a full garlic bulb that you don't harvest and you leave it there, it will survive until the next year, and then all the little garlic cloves that are in there will grow into new plants the following year. So it's just going to multiply. So one garlic, if you leave it in the garden, will become between 6 and 12 new garlics the following year. Here's some perennial garlic, a whole bunch of plants there. I didn't bother harvesting any of them this year. They've been here for a few years. Sometimes I harvest, sometimes I don't. This year I didn't harvest any. So there's quite a few plants in there, probably 2 dozen in there. And I'm just going to leave them there over the winter. See how they do next year. This is our potato area, which I've already planted. That's the subject of another video. Here's some more perennial garlic in the corner of where I had my garlic last year. Well, this past year, I should say. So anywhere where I've got perennial vegetables growing in a food forest type situation, I'm going to be making sure that there's garlic in those areas this fall, so that we can get perennial garlic coming every year. It's so easy to just throw it in just about anywhere in your garden, and what'll happen is those areas where you're using it as a companion plant, or it's just a food forest item, or it's just there for decoration and you just harvest it partially, what'll happen is you leave one, the next year between 6 and 12 will grow in the same spot, and then at that point, you see the previous year you would have harvested it and you would have got 1 garlic. You left it there, you did nothing. You were basically, you could say you were a lazy gardener, and the following year you got between 6 and 12 garlics, which is great, because then what you can do is harvest 3 or 4 of them, or 10 or 11 of them, and then leave that one there again. Or harvest maybe 3 or 4 of them and leave the other 8 or 9 there, and then they'll multiply again and become a bigger clump of garlic. And you'll get more and more every year, which means this can become part of your perennial food forest that you never have to plant again. And that is really useful. What I could have done in like July or August, I could have pulled a few of these out and left the other ones in, and they would have been fine. And we would have got some extra garlic, plus some already pre-planted garlic for the following year. Now, it's not going to get your biggest garlics. How do you get your biggest garlics? Well, what you're going to have to do there is prepare a spot in your garden, which I'm going to show you today, and you're going to give each bulb about 6 inches or 15 centimeters of space. And what I've done is I've prepared a couple measuring sticks where I've set out the measurements, and I'm going to show you in a minute how I do that. And prepare your spot with a good amount of compost that you can plant your garlic into. And that's going to keep the weeds down, because garlic's small and it doesn't have big, huge leaves, so it's not going to shade out the leaves. So you want to have a lot of compost that you're going to plant your garlic into, that you put on top, if you can, on top of the garden just before planting your garlic, in order to keep the other seeds down, because many seeds take longer to sprout than a garlic clove is going to take. Now, why do you plant close to the end of the season, close to freeze up? Well, with hardneck garlic in cold climates, we're 5B here, or 5B, 6A, let's say, maybe even 6B. We need to update the calendar. You don't want to plant your garlic too early, because if it starts growing and, it grows this tall or that kind of thing, or this tall, then it's going to lose all that growth with freeze up. It's going to lose all that energy that it's put into growing that much. If it grows a little tiny bit, that's okay. What it's going to put out first is its roots, and the roots are going to be fine all winter. Now, like I said, you can leave garlic in the garden from the previous year and let it overwinter, and it's going to give you lots of garlic, but it's not going to necessarily give you the big bulbs, but it's going to give you lots of small bulbs. And sometimes the smaller bulbs have more flavor than the bigger ones. This is how you get your big bulbs. You wait until 2 or 3 weeks before freeze up, and you give them a lot of compost. You give them space between around 6 inches between each one, 15 centimeters. You put them in the ground, and then put a nice layer of leaves or other type of mulch on top, not too thick, so that the garlic can grow through it. And then when it starts growing through, when it gets to a certain height, that's when you're going to want to add leaves or some other kind of mulch between your plants to keep the weeds down. And don't forget to trim your garlic scapes if you want to have the biggest garlic bulbs. And you can use those in your cooking in the kitchen as well. Now I'm going to get started. The first thing you have to do when you're planting your garlic is you got to separate out your cloves. Now, don't peel them. Leave the peel on, so when you're separating out your cloves, you want to be careful about it. This garlic that you see here is the garlic that we harvested last July. These were harvested in mid-July and hung them to dry. We cured them in an outdoor shaded area for a couple days, and then finished curing them here in our workshop. Try and save your biggest, healthiest garlic bulbs for planting time. We did a video. You check out in the description for the link to the video from last July. We also did a video last fall about planting garlic. So this garlic we harvested in July, and we hung it to dry, and now here it is. We're using it. We kept most of it for the kitchen. We harvested 400 bulbs of garlic, and I've kept about 90 of them. So close to a quarter of them I've kept, because I want to harvest 500 next year, and which is what I was hoping to harvest this year. But where I planted them, which is where I've planted them the last 2 years, really good spot, because garlic does like to get a lot of water. Garlic needs a lot of water, so it needs a part of your garden that if you don't water, then a part of your garden that's going to be to retain water. So that's why you want to use a lot of compost, a lot of organic matter, a lot of humus to hold on to that water. Now, but where it was the last 2 years, well, that was a place that does get a lot of water. It's very, very wet. But this year, because we got a lot of rain, very, very much rain, that part of the garden never got dry. It was always wet underfoot. And so the garlic in the end didn't do as well as I would have liked. It didn't sort of dry up as well as I would have liked. Although I can see here, this is a few months later. We're August, September, October, November, 3.5 months later, and it's actually quite nice. So it's stored quite nicely anyway. I'm happy about that. But I'm experimenting with this idea of putting it into another part of the garden that does still get a lot of water. I'm putting it where I had my peppers this year. I'm experimenting with a new spot for the peppers next year. It's a bit too hot, but peppers like it hot, and other stuff hasn't grown well there. So I'm going to try the peppers there, and I'm going to plant this garlic where the peppers were. So it's a spot that gets a lot of water. But in the last 2 weeks, before you harvest your garlic, you want to make sure it gets a chance to dry up a bit. So when you see that your garlic is close to being ready to harvest, that means that let's say 2 out of its 6 leaves have gone dry. 2 or 3 out of its 6 leaves have gone dry. That's when it's just about ready to harvest. So let's say when it's starting to dry, those leaves, when it's got 1 or 2 that are starting to dry, you're getting close to harvest time. So you want that part of your garden to dry up. Now this is something that I learned from Alson, from Al's Food Forest, one of our subscribers here, and he often gives advice, and he gives excellent advice. I learned that from him, and so I'm experimenting. And you know, if it doesn't go well, it doesn't matter, because I always like to learn, and we'll see how it goes. The thing is, I'm also going to be planting my garlic everywhere in the garden. I'm going to throw some in just about everywhere, because in the last couple of years I've been harvesting all the stuff that I had planted everywhere. Not because I wanted to clear up areas and stuff like that, but next year I want more of my garden to be a perennial food forest. And so I've got spots that I've chosen that I'm not going to touch. I'm not going to replant. I'm just going to let stuff regrow all on its own. And so that's where I'm going to start putting the garlic mixed in with the other plants, because I want to have that garlic coming back, and I'm going to put it in all our other gardens too. Let's say our perennial ones, our chinampas gardens and so on, so that it comes back every year and it just keeps multiplying. Now, a trick to getting these cloves separated, because sometimes it can be a bit of a challenge getting them separated without peeling them, is you kind of just break that neck a little, and then you try and pull it through. And as you try and pull it through the whole garlic bulb, it opens up the garlic bulb, and it makes it a lot easier to separate the cloves. A lot easier to separate them out. You see that? When you open it up, very easy. Now, it also allows you to, if you look at this one, this is what I was saying earlier about it was just too wet in the last few weeks of growth of the garlic. And, I thought I was timing it good as far as the leaves were concerned and so on. But when it was time to harvest, they had basically suddenly, like, all the leaves were almost all dead and so on. And this is what happened. You see, because you need some of those leaves still fresh and green. Let's say you got 6 leaves or 8 leaves on your garlic. You only want 2 or 3 of them to be dead and dry, because those other ones, those still green ones that are on your garlic, those ones, as you're curing your garlic, are going to create this really nice layer of skin that's going to protect your garlic all winter long. It's going to make it so that it doesn't rot in the winter and so on inside the house, because the moisture is not going to be able to get in. But you got to make sure that you cure it, make it good and dry. So you want to get rid of most of the roots and so on. And you want to dry it, if possible, outside, not in the sunlight. You can have it spend maybe several hours on the first day in the sunlight to make sure that it's outwardly dry, but you don't want it to cook in the sunlight. After that, it's best to put it somewhere outside where it's going to be in the shade, but where there's a good flow of air. And then when you put it inside, you want to put it in a place inside where also air can flow through. And we use our workshop garage for that. Our garage, it never has cars in it, but it's got windows and airflow through it and so on. So this one here, I'm not going to put it in the garden because there's no protection for this garlic here. And so it's not going to last the winter. It's going to end up getting eaten, or it's going to rot or something like that. So I'm just going to bring this into the kitchen. So what I'm hoping to get here is about 500 cloves of garlic. We'll see. If they're all huge cloves, then maybe I won't get 500, but that's all right. We'll see. There's lots of garlic in the kitchen. Now I'm going to plant all these cloves, unless they're absolutely tiny. The real tiny ones, I'll just bring them into the kitchen. Oh, and here's something that's really, really important to know. Now I'm not peeling them, but obviously some of the peels come off. Now these peels, minus of course the dirty roots, but the peels you can keep. You know, this is homegrown garlic, so there's no pesticides, no herbicides, no chemical fertilizers, none of that stuff, which means the peels you can use in your cooking. You know how you can dry garlic, dry the cloves and so on. Well, why are you going to do all that work when you got peels that are already dry for you? Now you can blend that into a powder, a good flour blender or something. Mix it in with your other spices. Magali makes this great mix of 7 spices that we use. Garlic peels, onion peels as well. And then we put whole pumpkin seeds and whole sunflower seeds. Don't shell them. Put those in there. And then some other herbs from the garden, whichever ones that we have it on hand at the time. For a total about 7. And then Magali makes a powder out of that, and it is so good. So it's a great way to use your extra garlic peels, onion peels, pumpkin seeds, and your sunflower seeds, you know, because it's hard to shell them, but you don't need to shell them, those pumpkin and sunflower seeds. You know, not everybody likes to eat a pumpkin seed whole or a sunflower seed whole because of the hard outer shell. But the thing is, if you blend them into a powder, you're blending that shell into a powder, and that's going to give you extra fiber, and then you're going to get all the great protein and other nutrients from the seed inside. So she puts that into our dried spice mixes, and then adds that to soups and all sorts of other recipes. Sometimes she'll add it to our bread recipes. It is so good. It's so delicious. And you know, once I finish using all this garlic, there's going to be a ton of peels left over. I'm trying to make sure they all fall into here. I'm not going to use these stems, although who knows, maybe we could use the stems, but they probably don't have a whole lot of flavor in them. But peels have a ton of flavor in them, an absolute ton of flavor in them. So give it a try from your homegrown garlic. Use those peels. Don't throw them out. But once again, don't peel your garlic cloves when you're about to plant them. Keep that peel on because it's going to defend the cloves against getting eaten in the garden. So I think that I have prepared enough to get started on the planting. I've got all these other ones to peel, but I don't have to finish it today. But what I would like to finish today is this video. Beautiful day today, and it's quiet out. Nice when it's quiet out. So let's go. Go get this planted. I don't know how many are in there, but we'll soon find out. So I've added compost here to where I'm going to plant my garlic. Want to make sure it's good and level. This is mushroom compost I've added here. But any compost will do as long as it's well rotted. I've got these measuring sticks. I've got them all measured out with the correct spacing. All right, garlic 15 centimeters or 6 inches between each. So I lay one down here. This is going to tell me where the rows go. Now I'm making the rows and the space between the garlics the same thing because I don't walk between the rows. I can reach into the middle when I'm harvesting and so on. When it's time to harvest, I walk right into the garden. This one all set up. And then this one is going to tell me where each garlic can go. You see, along the row. Do some pre-digging, but really, this is loose enough I can do this all by hand. However, get these started. So you can see how that works. Now, as you're planting your garlic clove, you want to get it down so it's about, the top is about as deep as the height of the garlic clove. So you just push it in. So this garlic clove is about 1 inch tall, about 2.5 centimeters tall. So I want about close to 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters of soil above it. It's okay if it's close to the surface, but you don't want it on the surface. You want to make sure you got it down there good. Just push it down into the soil, and because I put a lot of compost in here, and I just harvested the peppers, finished harvesting them last week and removed them. So, and the peppers were planted really thickly here. So there wasn't a whole lot of weeds here. The peppers really kept the weeds down. Now, actually, I've left the pepper roots in the soil. I like to leave them in the soil because they're good for soil retention. The bugs like them. Feed the soil, feed the worms and so on. Get them moving the soil. Soil all nice and aerated and healthy, because that makes for healthy plants. And also it encourages mycorrhizal growth. That's why I use mushroom compost, because mycorrhizal growth, fungus in the soil, mushrooms in the soil, the plants need that too to be healthy. So when you're planting your garlic, the pointy end goes up, and the end where the roots had been are at the bottom, which is, there's a little kind of like a flat edge here. You can see the edge where the roots came out, whereas the pointy end, that's where the stem comes out. This one feels like it's got two in it, but it's not. I can't separate it without breaking it, so I gotta keep them together because I don't want to peel these things. They got two. There's so much space between them this year. This is the first time I do 6 inches or 15 centimeters between each garlic, because I don't like having all the weed pressure. But really, it's not that much space when I look at it. And once again, I'm going to be putting more compost on top of this when I'm done planting. And I'm going to put a thin layer of, I'm going to put a nice layer of leaves, but not too thick that the garlic can't grow through it. And then in the spring, when the garlic starts to grow, when it's a good 25 centimeters high, 10 inches tall, put a nice layer of leaves between the garlics. Keep the weeds down. As long as the weeds are good and shaded, then maybe their seeds won't germinate, and we'll have fewer weeds. There we go. This area is done. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rows. So we got we got 56 garlic planted so far right here. I'm hoping to plant about 9 times more than that. So I'm going to continue preparing the rest of this area, and then the other side, and we'll be good. Now I want to remember how many garlic cloves I've planted as I'm going, because I'm going to forget, and I want to make sure that I can plant between 400 and 500 of them. I forgot a pen. I don't feel like going back inside, so I'm going to use my garlic stems to count. So 7 times 8 is 56. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's 5. There's 50. And then the other group, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 56. I'm just gonna have to put that and remember what order it. Well, the tens will be on the left, the units will be on the right. There's 56, and as I get my new totals, then I'll change that with my other garlic stems here that I've got accumulated. So I can remember. I'm gonna put the other ones there and let's continue. That's another 56. Now 56 plus 56 is 112. 1 for 100. 1 for 10. 2 for 2. 112. As long as we don't have any strong winds, we're going to be fine with this counting system. It's good for schools. Alternative counting system. It's good for kids to learn that. So far, our total is 217. 210 and 7. 217. So I just planted 114. And here we have 217. So 217 plus 100 is 331. So 331. 331 for today. Meaty resting in the lavender. Right by where I was just working. Good morning. It's a couple days later. November 7th, Thursday, November 7th. And I still have this side of the garlic to plant. I'm hoping to at least get in about 169 today to have a total of 500. If there's more, that's good too. We'll see if I have enough cloves, and we'll finish filling up this garlic bed here where I used to have the peppers. Now, one thing that I didn't mention was all the good reasons to be growing and eating garlic. I spoke about having it growing all through your garden as a companion plant, but I didn't speak enough about why it's so great to have in the kitchen. Not only is it a fantastic ingredient in all your food, whether you dice it, whether you crush it, whether you insert it into into a meat that you're roasting, or throw it in a stew whole, or whether you roast it, cut it in half in some olive oil, and you roast that until you can spread it like butter. Those are all such fantastic ways of eating garlic. But one of the best ways of eating it is crushed or diced raw, added into salad dressings, or added into your food right before you eat it, like into sauces or anything like that, while it's raw. And the action of chewing on it raw, or simply crushing it or dicing it, they all do the same thing. What happens is when you crush it, when you dice it, or when you chew it raw, all three of those raw, what you're doing is there's a chemical reaction happening inside the garlic that's releasing the allicin. And the allicin is the property of the garlic that is very, very medicinal, and that's what's going to be the most beneficial for you. Garlic is good for you in any manner, but when you have it that way, you're going to have the most properties. You're going to get let's say the most out of each time you eat it. And if you have it every day, that's even better. I've got 3 books that I've been using for between 15 and 25 years that I've always had on me, that I use as references for medicinal plants, to learn more about medicinal plants and their properties and how to prepare things and so on, because that's something it's important that you have reliable information. One of them is Peterson's Field Guide, and the other 2 are Herbal Medicinals guides. There's one that's much more recent, from published in 2007, but the other 2 were published. One was in 1999 and the Field Guide was in at 2,000. So I've been using them for a long time. All three of them talk about garlic having cancer prevention properties, especially if you use it every day. And that's why we grow enough garlic so that we can use it all year. Last year we got well over 500 garlic bulbs. And then a year ago, last fall, when I planted my garlic, I gave them a bit more space, and I didn't have quite as much space as I expected. So we didn't get as many bulbs this year. We got a bit over 400, but this year I've made sure that I got enough space so that we can at least get 500 bulbs. That'll give us about 100 that I can keep for replanting and 400 for the year. All three of these books talk about garlic being excellent for respiratory infections, for colds, flus, sore throats, coughs, bronchitis. They talk about it being good for stomach aches, stomach infections. They talk about the fact that if you crush it raw, it's the most effective, or dice it, or even chew it. It's the most effective, chew it raw. But one way or another, cutting it or crushing it and cooking it as little as possible is always the best. These sources also talk about it being excellent for cardiovascular health, for heart health, for lowering cholesterol levels, lowering blood sugar levels. And they talk about, all three of them talk about long-term use is a good cancer prevention. They talk about it being a diuretic. And finally, they talk about it being antibacterial and antifungal, and the fact that before antibiotics were invented, garlic was often used to treat infections. We have a video where Maggie ferments some garlic and honey. Really, really good. That's an excellent way to use it. Here, I'm just putting a thin layer of leaves. Just to help keep the weeds down. So if there are any weed seed in there, they're going to be shaded and they're not going to germinate as quickly. But I don't want to put such a thick layer that the garlic won't be able to grow through it. Because the thing about leaves is if you put a thick layer of leaves, nothing wrong with that, but it becomes a mat that almost nothing can grow through. And so if you're going to do that over the winter, it's important in the spring when it's time for things to start growing through it, or when it's time to plant into it, you're going to have to either loosen them up or rake them off completely. And if there's stuff that's supposed to grow through it, well, you're going to have to be careful as you remove it. So this is a thin layer of leaves. I can still see some of the soil through it, because I don't want to have to rake these off afterwards. I just want the garlic to grow right through it. So just to discourage any weed growth. The garlic is in, and with a light cover of leaves. All done. 527 garlic cloves planted for next year, leaving us with maybe 100 this time to keep for planting next year, and 427 for the kitchen. We'll see if they all grow. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you learned something from it. Hope you found it interesting. And if you found it interesting and you enjoyed it, then please share it with your friends. And if you haven't done so yet, then subscribe to our channel. Support what we do here, the work we do here, simply by subscribing. Have a great week. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next time.